Hey there, sisters, it's Dawn, and just getting my gear set up here. Okay, so today is this morning or this afternoon, my time here in Sedona, we had moon number 8, call number 1. And this moon's theme is reclaiming the blood, women's blood mysteries. And so the call itself, as you will see, included more conversation around some of the current events that are going on, as well as some astrological insights. And what I didn't get to was a whole bunch of other stuff in the outline that I felt would better serve you and better serve other women coming through this program in the future if I just recorded it, because it's the timeless information. So what I have here, and for those of you who have downloaded the outline, you'll see it's like a whole list of stuff. And there's 3 sections, really. There's the denigration of the moon time, there's women's blood mysteries, and moon time ceremonies. So when I made the outline, I just kind of did a little bit of a brain dump or a data dump of some things that I might want to talk about. So what I want to do now is I want to just connect in with my own self now, several hours since our call, and just see if there's a way for me to weave all of these things together. So if you just give me a minute while I connect in. Okay, so at this point in our work together, you know that one of the things that I talk about and teach about is the denigration of the feminine principle in a dominator culture that is patriarchal. So a dominator culture that values the masculine over the feminine. And by now we've talked about numerous ways that can look. And one of the manifestations, let's say, of that is the denigration of, and the sort of what's the word? It's not, denigration isn't quite the right word. It's like gross out, like ew, about women's menstrual blood. And this is a very interesting thing if you think about it, because our menstrual blood is the very substance that holds, contains, and becomes the support material to grow new life. And so each moon, as a woman's egg releases from her and goes through her, from her ovaries, her ovary comes through the fallopian tube and comes into the womb space. If it gets fertilized, all of that blood that's been building up on the inside of the womb space serves to begin to nourish that life. That's where the placenta will grow and attach and provide. It's the connection, it's the support, it's the container for the baby, or the sacred fluids of supporting that life. If the egg is not fertilized, then we bleed, we shed that lining, and in so doing, we are literally going through a cleanse. We do an internal release and cleanse at each and every moon, each and every month, each and every 28-ish days. Women in their childbearing years, which still comprises the majority of most women's lives, cleanse ourselves on a monthly basis. So there is something really sacred about this blood. First of all, we know it's also very, as long as you're eating a healthy diet, it's very mineral rich and healthy. It's a vitamin and mineral rich, but it's also very sacred. And yet, a woman's moon blood is considered something to be hidden, not talked about, embarrassed about. Goddess forbid you should leak some blood onto your pants or skirt. And when you think about this, now think about this for a moment. The way we respond to women's menstrual blood, just culturally, like you individually might not, I personally didn't, but just consider the cultural relationship, attitude toward menstrual blood. commercials up until recently, and maybe even still, were not allowed to have any red tones, pinks, oranges in their commercials for sanitary products, as if this is something unsanitary. So even the color red, like if you'll notice, like a lot of packaging is blue. Come on, menstrual blood is like this color, there's nothing really blue about it. So, okay, so consider that on the one hand. Then consider popular entertainment. Consider all of the blood and gore and violence that is considered entertainment in our world. The blood of the killing, the bloodletting, the bloodlust that is considered perfectly acceptable, it's certainly an adult TV, to be entertained with. And yet we are grossed out by, repelled by, don't want to know about, don't want to see the blood of the woman. So this is why I wrote that piece, or this is a sort of a motivation for writing that piece, Bleeding All Over the Patriarchy. Because it just is another illustration of the way things are they're on their heads when we are living in a culture that absolutely diminishes one aspect of being a human, which is the feminine aspect, and elevates the other aspect to the point of absurdity. So there's in India, in the area of India that's north of Bangladesh, so the far east of India, the northeast of India, there's a temple to a goddess. Her name is Kamakaya Devi, and she is the menstruating goddess. And so there's an entire temple dedicated to the menstruating goddess. And at that temple, guess what? If you're menstruating, you can't go in. So again, here we are, another thing just turned on its head into the absurdity. Menstruating women are not allowed to go into the temple of the menstruating goddess. How much sense does that make? Okay, so that's another thing I wanted to talk about. Now, I wanted to talk about, what are the implications of a society in which this ultra, super natural phenomena that every woman experiences for the majority of her life is shamed, ignored, diminished, grossed out, it wants to be put aside. What are the implications for us as women? What are the implications for us as a society? So I wanted to touch on a few things that I had included in my list of my brainstorm here. One is menstrual pain. Now, I get the body is cramping. We are cramping to release the flow. And so there's some sensation associated with that. And I can't speak to anyone else's body but my own. What I can say for sure is that once I had labor pains, menstrual pains seemed like not worth complaining about. However, I definitely had some menses that were more intense than others. And still, I always wonder, I'll never know, we won't know. I mean, maybe we know when we die and we have these questions for the goddess, right? What would it be like to be in a culture where our moon blood was honored? Would we have pain? Would it be pain? Would we be nurtured and nourished by other women in the red tent? Where we would have compresses or massages or special chants or special ways of being cared for, such that the association with this cramping sensation became one where we felt supported, held, nurtured, nourished. And how would that affect how we perceived the sensation? Would it be perceived as pain? We live in this culture where we want to plug it up, shut it up, ignore it, block it. Where women say, oh God, I got my period again. Or it's my grandmother used to call it your friend. Did you get your friend? Did you get your friend? Did your friend come over? So, we maybe we could never know, but I just really deeply believe, imagine that if we lived in a culture, in a community that honored a woman's moon blood, we would have a physiologically different experience of those sensations. Which leads me to another thing, which is endometriosis. Now, I'm not an expert at this, so I don't want to speak as any kind of medical professional. However, I grew up with a mom who had severe endometriosis, and I think if you know me, you know I'm adopted, and the reason why I'm adopted is because they couldn't conceive. So, and I've known other women who've gone through this too. Every month was kind of like a little, I wouldn't say a mini hell in my family, but I would say that we all knew that my mother was in pain. And it wasn't so nice. It's not like she was cruel to us or anything, but it's just, when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And so my mom went through every single month of like severe menstrual pain, where she was short, she was ill-tempered, she was in pain. And there's this book, I don't have a copy of it, but it's this big fat book that goes into really granular detail of different kind of symptomology and the energetic association. And recently I was doing some work with my NLP teacher, and we looked up endometriosis because the whole thing about my mom and adoption came up. And it was really interesting to see what it was, because there were definitely associations about being angry at the feminine or angry with your own femininity or feeling squashed and suppressed and resentful as a woman. So I thought that was interesting. So I wanted to also just bring that up. I talked about menstrual product commercials, shame and embarrassment, the covering of women starting at menarche. Okay, so, in Islam, to the best of my knowledge anyway, women who get themselves covered to whatever degree, that begins when they begin their bleeding. So, take that for what it's worth. I'm sure there's a whole reasonology around what that is. And it's all patriarchy. It's all reasonology created by men, for men, in service to men, and male-dominated culture. So, and then perpetuated by men, and as I've talked about before as well, perpetuated also often by women who have identified with that patriarchal culture. So I wanted to tell you about when I was in university. I had, I studied women's studies in university, and we had kind of a women's studies 101 or 201 or something like that. So it was a basic kind of course. We had a workbook. And in the workbook, what do you call it? Like a reader, where you have different shorter feminist theory things. And then there was one, it was like a kind of a cartoon essay or a humorous essay, not a cartoon, but a humorous essay. And it was called If Men Could Menstruate. And it was like, I wish I had kept it, because it was like, it made your stomach hurt. It was so funny. So it'd be things like, guys would be like in the men's locker room, football players would be like, yeah, give me the ultra maxi pad, man. I'm a heavy flower. Or, and it just went on and on. There would be arguments as to why men were the only ones really qualified to lead, because they were the only ones in tuned enough with their own cycles to be able to lead in a complete way. Or there'd be things like, double extra tampon sizes, and, guys would be chucking them across the locker room. Hey, dude, here's my extra large, this kind of thing. So anyway, I can't do the humor of it justice, but hopefully you get a little sense of, if men could menstruate, this would be a different world. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. What I do know is that whenever we polarize and diminish one, whole set of qualities, it's going to look unequal. And that's really what we have. So what if we did flip it on its head? What then? What if men did menstruate? Then women would be told, well, you don't have those moon cycles. You don't have those emotional ups and downs. So you're really not qualified to lead public offices, heads of corporations, making decisions in the family. You're not qualified. And these are the exact arguments that have been used against us, that we are, that we have these emotional cycles, that, our insides heat up too much or whatever. There's been all kinds of silly nonsense over the decades as to why women can't fill in the blank. So it would just be interesting, to see if things were different, how the storyline would, how the justifications for the hegemony of one gender over another would show themselves. And then I also wanted to talk about, well, I wrote in here Native American sweat lodges. And again, I am not qualified to speak to this. What I have heard and heard from some Native Americans is that women are seen when we are on our moon time as so powerful that we should not be in a moon lodge with men. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't really have much to say about that. So maybe someone here would know and be able to comment further about it. I think because I received that in the context of an overall planetary culture that is blatantly oppressive toward anything feminine, that I have some reservations about that, let's just say. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about with this piece about the denigration of the moon time, or conversations about how we perceive moon time for women, is the Oresteia trilogy. So the Oresteia trilogy was written by a playwright named Aeschylus in the 5th century BC. So we're talking the Greeks. And this is there's a longer story here, so I want to kind of getting up in my head. So let me just get here connected. Okay, so at the end of the Trojan War, which is told during in the book by Homer called the Iliad. Homer wrote a book, the Iliad and the Odyssey, 2 books, the Iliad and the Odyssey. These are epic poems. The Iliad was one of the great, both of them were the great epic poems, epic tales of Greek culture. They were passed down orally over a long period of time. Later on, the poets like Aeschylus started writing plays related to those original tales from long before that. And so one of the tales that's related to that, but was not written in the original text, was called the Oresteia trilogy. And it weaves in a lot of stuff about the curse on the house of Atreides, and we don't need to go into that, but if you do study the Greek stuff, then you know what I'm referring to here. So let's fast forward now. It's the beginning of the Trojan War. It's before the Trojan War starts. Now, this is in Homer. And all of the Achaean or Greek troops have all gathered together, all their ships and all their men, and they're all over there in Achaia, which is Greece, part of Greece, where the king of all the troops, his name is Agamemnon. He's like the head honcho of all of these warriors. They all gather to his area, and they're all going to set sail together to go to Troy to take Helen back and attack the Trojans, et cetera, make their warring ways. And what happens is there's no wind. There's no wind. There's no wind. There's no wind. So the boats can't take sail. They didn't have motors. They needed wind. So finally, they get an old seer to go into a trance state and find out what's going on, or to maybe through some bones or whatever. I don't remember. And what he comes back to Agamemnon, the head of all of the troops, and he says, "Look, the Poseidon, the sea god, is angry at you, and so he won't let the winds come up." I think it's the sea god. "You're going to have to sacrifice a virgin. When you sacrifice a virgin, then the gods will be happy, the winds will come up, and you all can go over to Troy there." So Agamemnon's like, "Right, okay, I have a virgin daughter. I'll sacrifice her." So he gets his daughter Iphigenia, and he sacrifices her. And he does it without the knowledge of Iphigenia's mother and his wife, named Clytemnestra. So when Clytemnestra finds out that her husband has sacrificed her daughter so that they could all go to war, she is furious. So the men all set sail for war, and for 10 years, Clytemnestra, while all the warriors are over there in Troy, now we're going to the playwright Aeschylus. So now here comes the story from the play that's added to this. For 10 years, Clytemnestra plots the murder of her husband for murdering her daughter. And sure enough, 10 years go by, Agamemnon comes back, and she welcomes him with grand, the red carpets, and she welcomes him, my husband, welcome home, the great warrior, come, let me draw you a bath, let me feed you a banquet. She feeds him a banquet, she draws him a bath, he's in the bath, laying in the bathtub, she has her lover come over and slit his throat. She kills him. So then, what happens? Orestes is her son, and Orestes is furious that his mother killed his father. So he kills his mother. Now, there's this thing in the ancient Greek mythology called the Erinyes or the Furies. And their job is to make sure that anyone who commits patricide, which is the murdering of your parents, that revenge is taken. So as soon as Orestes kills his mother, the Furies come after him. They come after him. They're like, you killed your parent? That's like the worst of the worst. You have to die. And what happens in the Orestean trilogy is what we call now the first illustration of a court case in all of Western history, Western literature. And I'm getting somewhere believe me, I know this is a bit of a long tale, but so what happens is Orestes wants a trial. He says, wait a minute, don't kill me. I have a justified reason for this. She killed my father, and I have the right to defend my father's honor. So a court case is set up, and Apollo, the god Apollo, is the judge. And Athena, here's a co-opting of a goddess to serve a patriarchal end, Athena becomes the lawyer or the attorney of Orestes. And the Furies are Orestes is the defendant, so the Furies are the prosecutors, right? They're the prosecuting side. And so they're saying, hey, look, he's got to die. He killed his mother, he's got to go. And this is the defense that ultimately ends up saving Orestes' life. Athena says, well, look, technically, Clytemnestra wasn't really his mother. What she was kind of like soil. She was just like soil. And so Agamemnon, who was his father, planted the seed in the soil. She was just like soil. She just gestated him for 9 months, popped him out, but she doesn't count as a parent. So why do I tell this story? Because this is a really key piece in at least literarily showing a period of time where there was kind of the final blow to at least the power we had as women to claim our right as mothers, to claim our right that this womb space, this sacred womb space, and the blood that held that child was something sacred that gave us some right to our parenthood, our maternity. And this was like the final blow, in a sense, to that in that story. So I felt it was relevant. I hope I didn't go too far on a tangent with you on this. That these are just a few different points that I brought up about what has happened to an experience of womanhood that we almost all of us go through, unless there's a health issue or something, for a good portion of our lives. And what the implications are when we disregard the feminine, some of the ways that might manifest. And so I'd love to hear from all of you. What are some other ways where you have seen this, or maybe seen or experienced a reclaiming of your sacred moon blood? in the context of what we know is a culture that doesn't value the feminine. Okay, so that's that piece. Now I wanted to talk about women's blood mysteries. So, and I actually write about this. I want to get this page up here. Excuse me. I'm just going to grab the worksheet because it makes more sense for me just to read this to you. Over the course of history, those things deemed feminine have been considered of lesser importance. At best, feminine qualities were undervalued, at worst, demonized. When it comes to our naturally feminine cycles of bleeding, this attitude becomes terribly clear. There's been a great deal of negativity around our periods. So it is worth exploring what our personal imprints, attitudes, and relationships to this central aspect of a woman's life actually is. So, a word about the blood mysteries. The so-called blood mysteries would probably be very little much of a mystery at all to most women. The blood that builds within our womb space each moon during the childbearing years is the blood of life. It is what nourishes a child if conception occurs and supports that child safely in the womb space. And it is what is shed as a kind of internal cleansing each moon when no child grows. Each month for many, many years, a woman bleeds for days and does not die nor weaken. She self-purifies to prepare her womb space and her energy field to nurture and grow through the next lunar cycle. In ancient times, when we lived more communally and by the natural cycles of the sun and moon with no electricity and no, artificial light, it is said that women bled together on the dark moon and ovulated on the full moon. In those times, we had shared with each other the wisdom of self-care and care for our families. In the red tent, each cycle, we raised our daughters, honored our mothers, and learned from our grandmothers. And part of this was the sharing of the mysteries of life, the blood mysteries of a woman's moon cycle. So I wanted to just read that to you, and you can see that as well in the worksheet for this moon. I wanted to also talk a few more things. The rhythm method of birth control. I don't know if any of you have ever done that, but there was more of our time in history where we had birth control. And despite the argument that poor or ignorant people make too many babies, the truth is when the power of our own bodies was in our hands, we understood how to control our own birth because we knew how to sense and read in our bodies when we were ovulating and when we did not want to have intercourse if we did not want to have another child. It's also why when we nurse full time, we don't get our periods right away because we want to give our bodies need a break. We give our bodies a break from the possibility of conception through nursing. Okay, so I shared on the video today, but I'll share it here too, the story of Lilith. Lilith as the first, she's an Old Testament. Oh no, I didn't share it. I shared it with a client call today. Okay, so in the Old Testament, before Eve, there was Lilith. And Lilith, I don't know the actual Old Testament story. I know a very radical feminist version of the story, so I'll share it with you, but I know it comes from a seed of truth. Lilith was a chthonic goddess. She was a goddess who created herself and then created a mate to make love with, Adam. And so Lilith was the first wife, if you will, or helpmate or lover of Adam. And when Adam decided he wanted to be in control and dominate and get on top of her, she said, no, bye-bye. And Lilith leaves. Lilith is sometimes shown as part serpent, part woman. I don't know the full story. What I do know is that in the mythical goddess tarot, let me see if I have Lilith around here. She is the card, the major arcana, goddess of power. Anyway, I don't want to take too much time going through it, but this deck here, Mythical Goddess Tarot. So she's the goddess of power. So this is an archetype of feminine power that I feel connects with women's blood mysteries, because she's deeply connected with the earth and deeply willing to own her feminine power, her feminine sexual power. So that's why I introduce her here. There's also something, and I would have to find it, and I know I've shared it in the group before, but I don't know where it is now. The reclaiming of the word cunt. So cunt, in this day and age in the English language, is considered the most insulting thing you could call a woman. It's a really hateful term. And like so many things, it comes from a statement that has to do with feminine sexual sovereignty and personal power and sovereignty over our pleasure. So like the word witch before it, and goddess and priestess, cunt is a word that some women are, we don't see it very much, but I think it's a word that we're going to see more and more as women awaken and are, reclaiming all of our sovereignty and authority. We're going to possibly see that word cunt being reclaimed even more. So, a few other things. I have a sister friend, and many of you maybe have been to the Chalice Well in Glastonbury. It's on my list now, where because of the iron in the water runs red, and it's said to be the menstrual blood of Mother Earth, among other things. And so that's what I wanted to share. There's more I could share. I thought about doing moontime ceremonies, but I'm just going to touch on some possibilities here. And I really want to invite you, as I wrap this video up, to really consider what kind of rites of, first of all, what was your experience with your first period? What was your rite of passage? Did you have one? Was it honoring? Was it shaming? Was it embarrassing? Was it, ooh, don't tell daddy? What was it like? Just reflect on that. Then I wanted to share with you 4 possible ceremonies related to our womb moon blood. And the first of those is the rite of passage of menarche. So a young woman's first moon, her first bleeding. And in traditional societies that respected the feminine, of course, this was a celebration. We have a young girl who is being initiated into the rite of womanhood, who can now conceive and bring forth life. This is celebration worthy. This is honoring. So if you have a young woman in your life, how might you want to honor her when it's her time, or a young girl, when it's her time to step through that gate of transformation, that rite of passage into womanhood? That's one rite of passage that is related to the moon blood. Another is the moon return after childbirth. So I already touched on that. Obviously, once we're pregnant, we don't bleed. At least we shouldn't be sometimes, but certainly not a menstrual cycle bleeding. And then once we give birth and we nurse our child, of course, the blood isn't going to come. We have 6 weeks of the postpartum bleeding, approximately. But then after that, it could be months, it could be many months before the first blood returns. So that's another time to make an honoring ceremony, either in a sister circle or for yourself. And then another one is bleeding blessings, where we honor ourselves by doing just a blessing during our menses. And one of the files for Moon 8 is the 13 magical things you could do with your moon blood, or something like that. Let me see what it's called. 13 acts of radical reclamation for your moon womb blood. So you can look at that for some ideas. And then finally, the last one is croning. Croning is when a woman's period stops. And sometimes, like I did my croning away time when I was 50, but I bled until I was 52. Yeah, 52. So Croning is another rite of passage. It is when a woman moves from her childbearing years into her elder wisdom years and becomes she who holds her blood within. And it is another time to create a beautiful honoring ceremony for yourself or for a sister friend among sister friends. So those are all possibilities. So I invite you to reflect on those and consider what might be the next one you would want to create. And please share your thoughts, your reflections in the group. And with this, I'm going to sign off for now and sending you all much love and bright blessings until our next meeting. Mwah. Love for now.